Hello, everybody. All right. Looking at laws of the apartheid. Now, one of the first ones, I know a lot of you are asking me because it said 1913. So obviously, this one was created prior to the real impact of the apartheid. But the Native Lands Act was 35 years, and this one is going to impact all of the Africans. And like I said to you in the prior video, it prohibited them from living in the white area. So what they basically did is there was about 8% of the land that they left for the Africans. So that meant that the land that they couldn't farm on, that they couldn't really use in a vital way, was off limits to them. So they could only live outside of the white reserves if it was for employment. So if they worked somewhere that was somewhat close, they could have done so. Now again, the Africans make up the majority of the population, and they're only given 8% of the land. So majority of the population living on not even 10% of the entire country. So whites only make up 10% of the population at this time, and they get 80% of the land. So obviously this is doesn't make sense at all. And when they're living in these parameters, they are living so closely together that now it's going to cause issues with tension. If they're not getting along, if they're having problems, now everybody is living in one remote spot. Now, the Prohibition of Mixed Marriages Act came about in 1949, so this is a year after the real start of apartheid. Africans were basically in a category, but if you were a non-white, so that could have meant any sort of Asian background, Indian, those groups would be considered like the mixed. So white people were not just forbidden from marrying them, but even a common relationship. And the problem with this law was if people were seen just walking down the street or mingling together, that would have been deemed inappropriate relationship. So there were people that would call the cops and they would rat these people out just for having a relationship, a friendship. So it got to a point where just a common day relationship was viewed as brutal. It was illegal. So if you were found mingling between the races, it would have been bad. So Africans were under constant surveillance, and if caught intermingling, they would have been arrested, beaten, and just treated completely terribly. Now, this was a way to keep the white race pure, and what they thought was to keep the white race pure was a way to just prevent mixed racial backgrounds. Now, if you think about the way we are today, I mean, we don't look at each other as, a race. We just kind of look at each other as who gets along. So things have definitely come a very long way. You look very handsome, buddy. Very, very handsome. Now, Bantu Education Act of 1953. This is 5 years after, and this is going to greatly impact.
Can I get some chicken?
Grandpa's getting you chicken. This is going to impact the education. Now, again, we've talked about if you are not educated, it's very difficult for you to see what you are capable of, what life has to offer. So they separated the educational facilities. Now, if you think about American history, this was kind of going on at the same time, where separate but equal facilities were everywhere. So what they did is they gave them these school buildings that maybe didn't even have full electricity, partially no running water, no plumbing, so that meant that the bathrooms didn't work. So they were expected to go to these schools that were not fully functioning, and then on top of it, the teachers that they were able to get weren't even certified teachers. They were people that were kind of looking for work. Sorry if you can't hear me right now. The books were kind of when they said that the books were racist, what happened was back then they used to publish these books with racist connotations. So a kafir, or a word that was a derogatory term that they would put in these books, they would give these people those books. So imagine being of a mixed race and having to read derogatory terms about yourself to refer to yourself as. So the educational facilities, the books were falling apart, the teachers weren't educated, so it was controlling their level of education. And when they aren't educated, it's going to be very difficult for them to get a job later in life and to really just kind of move past these ways. The Terrorism Act of 1967 is 19 years later, and this one is going to basically allow police to detain you or to stop you for no reason. They could look at you and pull you over. They could look at you and stop you walking down the street for no other reason than they could. This was going to cause tremendous anguish amongst the community, because now they know that they're just walking home, maybe from work, and the cops could have stopped them and accused them. Oh, we saw someone rob a bank, or we saw someone break into a house. We got a report. It had to have been you. So people were being wrongfully tried and wrongfully accused for acts of crime that they weren't doing. And again, the whites knew this, so the whites were getting away with crimes and misdemeanors and all these sorts of issues, because they knew if they pushed the blame on the Africans, the police were going to support them. Again, the government, the police, this was all being run by the whites. So they knew that this was going to work out. So they were able to basically take you, put you in jail, and they really didn't have to have a reason. They could have just detained you and kept you there for as long as they wanted. The Population Registration Act. Now, some people were looking at this one. How did this really impact you? Now, we, as a culture, there are derogatory terms that will impact you, whether you wear glasses or you have red hair, braces. But if we got into a racial connotation, we know that there are words that are used to basically describe different racial groups. So what they basically did is they would take types of foods that they ate, characteristics, their hair, the texture of their hair, the color of their skin, the dynamic of the features of their face, and they basically made you categorize yourself and your family based off of these backgrounds. So you had to now list all of these things. So maybe I come from an Italian background. My grandfather had a very large nose. It was characteristic of the culture, and family-wise, we had a lot of people with that same nose. Some people are very self-conscious about it. Some people could care less. But they had to put down these characteristics, which in a sense, it created anxiety. It was forceful racism. They were basically pushing on people to call out any sort of insecurities that they had. If you have acne and you had to basically tell everybody, yes, I have an acne, look at my face, judge me because of it, and it gave people a reason to kind of make fun of them or laugh at them. So this was going to, again, remove their social and political rights, educational opportunities. Oh, wait, look, it says here that this person is of an African descent. Not going to hire them for the job, not going to allow them into the school. So it basically cut them off from having equal opportunities. And then the Pass Laws Act. Africans over the age of 16 had to carry a passbook. So think about back to the Holocaust times. The Jews had to wear the Star of David. They had to show and prove. So again, when they were in public, maybe you didn't look Jewish, maybe you didn't look African, or maybe you didn't have all of the features of a telltale person. Now you had to prove and constantly show your background, and people again would be able to call you out or categorize you. And on top of that, if you were out in public and you didn't have this passbook with you, you could have been arrested. It was just another way to put people in jail, controlling their daily life. If every time I left my house, I didn't have my wallet, you know how many times I leave my house without my wallet? And if I had to prove with an ID every time I left and I didn't have that, I would end up in jail. Again, it was just a way to control every little aspect of their life, and it was a way for the government to completely control them. So what you guys are going to do is, after explaining all of these laws, you're going to be looking at, which is due tomorrow, the international response. So what you're supposed to do with this one is reading how countries around the world reacted to this. So we think about, as a nation, if we were to sit back and watch another country do this, would we step in? And in a sense, if you think about what has happened post-genocide, we absolutely should. We should not permit the mistreatment and the segregation and the forced racism upon other groups. So when you read each response, it's going to give you a year. I want you to write down what they did to possibly help stop what the apartheid government was doing. And then I want you to just give it a pass or a fail. Pass meaning I think they did a good enough part, or a fail meaning there really wasn't anything that was being done in a way that would have stopped these terrible acts from happening. Hope you enjoyed, and I didn't have too much interruption. And I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.